If you're a homophobe, fuck you.
Those losses have given us common bonds.
Console Crusade Podcast. I'm EJ Olson. Joining me, as always, Nick Durheim.
Wody!
And Chris Gilly 4. We're back at it again. So we're doing something we have not done in a long time today, boys, and that is talking news. Talking nudes.
EJ, I know what you want to talk about, so let's talk about it.
Oh, God. Right off the rip?
Yeah, right off the rip. I mean, let's get you hyped up. Let's let you cool down for the next 2.5 hours or whatever. As of what, today or
yesterday, the 27th,
the Wii U and 3DS eShops are officially closed. I wanted to talk about this because there was basically a month of content creators saying, you should get these games, you should buy this crap. And it's like, don't let the store closing down be the reason why you buy these things. If you weren't going to buy them, don't buy them. If you want to play them later, there are archives. Archive.org is a great resource. It is the current day Library of Alexandria. There is a website called eShop that has literally every single piece of 3DS content on it. So if you need to visit that place to get the things that are no longer accessible to you, do that. I think that's totally fine. I mean, I will go out and say that Nintendo does not owe it to you to sell you these things, and you also don't owe it to Nintendo to buy them.
We are not advocating you do anything illegal as a listener, though these options exist. You should do what your heart tells you. I will say that morally, I have zero moral issue with anybody doing anything resembling piracy. You know, I can't imagine Nintendo's going to be cracking down now that they've shut down their fucking servers. You know, I think before this happened, hesitancy to crack your 3DS is a valid thing to like worry about, you know, being banned, not being able to access the eShop, banned from online, whatever. That doesn't matter anymore. It's all dead. Chris, are you a big 3DS guy? I know we famously talk a lot of shit about the 3DS on here.
We do. I mean, I played a fair amount of games on it, you know, as you know, and as I think listeners of this podcast know, I am a 3DS ambassador, which means that I was one of the stupid fucks who bought the 3DS at launch, the disastrous launch that led them to drop the price like some 6 months later. And they gave out, which at the time felt kind of like a paltry pittance, to be honest, like 10 NES titles from the eShop and 10 Game Boy Advance titles. Now that we're at the end of the whole eShop's lifespan, they never did any GBA downloadable support on that console, did they? I don't think they did.
No, it was purely for the ambassadors.
Yeah. So that is cool as fuck to me. So I've got Metroid Fusion on there forever. I've got Yoshi's Island on there forever. I've got Wario Land 4. I've got WarioWare on there forever. And so I played a lot of that. I did a little bit of downloadable stuff. You know, I like my physical copies. So I played mostly Pokemon and Samus Returns when that came out. But I was, maybe this will like seed the garden a little bit, EJ, for your epic rant on the subject. I was current in terms of my getting my Pokemons where they needed to be to safely make the jump to home now that the eShop's closing. So in 2014, like almost 9 years ago, exactly a little over 9 years ago, I started a migration all the way up from Generation 3, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Ruby, Sapphire, all the way to Pokemon Moon, which was like a massive undertaking, pal parking my entire Kanto living national dex into Heart Gold, and then using the transporter to move it 6 at a time up to, I think Black version, then finally being able to put it into Pokemon Bank, and then migrate it up to Pokemon Moon. So I already did all that labor, which meant that for me, I just needed to make sure, okay, Pokemon Bank, I've got that installed. It's going free to use now, so I didn't have to pay for it. I'm all set to migrate my living national dex that's existed for like literally decades of software.
Wow, that's so impressive.
It's fucking cool, man. And it was a really cool project. I think, honest to God, like that's the coolest thing I've ever done as a gamer. Is like a living national dex that is all from my games, physical copies that I have had. So I'm like set in that regard. And you know me, I like my physicals. I'm not an eShop guy, my buddy Nate was like, you may want to consider Spirit Tracks and whatever the other Wind Waker sequel on the DS was, just because those are going to be really, the price of that cart is probably already gone up by like 100% or 125% with the eShop closing. But I'm like, no.
Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah, there we go. I would rather have a cart if I'm going to do it. So wasn't really any skin off my back, as the saying goes.
For me, yeah, like EJ said, 3DS was not my favorite console, and the Wii U has been sitting gathering dust in like a little box in the corner of my entertainment center. So I'm not like affected by this in any meaningful way. And luckily, the 3DS is very easily hackable. If you want to go that route, if you do want to play these games on original hardware, you are capable of doing that still. I think that is the actual important aspect of this, not the consumer sort of response of buying these things while you still can, quote unquote.
There was definitely an aspect of FOMO as the community sort of rallied around this flashpoint.
Oh, certainly. And you get the videos like the completionist buying every single game available in North America. And like, that's a cool video idea. And it's like, sure, it's an easy top 10 games you should get from the 3DS that are, digital only, whatever. I mean, it's content creator bait for sure. The people who are upset about this happening, I don't have like a ton of, empathy towards that thought process, because they told us they were going to do it. And this is a shop that people are not buying things from anymore. Like the 3DS is not getting new software. The Wii U is not getting new software. They haven't for years. They were not extremely vibrant online shops to begin with. They hardly like worked when they were contemporary, and they are not attached to account systems that will transfer into later like hardware revisions. So it does not matter if these shops close. The things that they were offering as far as keeping these titles accessible, you can do that still. Like you can still access these games that are archived almost completely, and that is like fantastic if you do need to play these games. But like I said, Nintendo does not owe it to you to provide those games for you. So if you need to play them, you make that decision for yourself, and you can get them. And I don't want to like say that I advocate for piracy, but at that point, yeah, I'll advocate for that. Like, I don't care if you can't give money for the thing that you want to play.
I feel that. I think that and I agree largely they do not owe it to us. Where I'll differ with you a little bit though, or maybe implicitly, just that you mentioned this and didn't dive too much into it, is the fact that these shop systems and their hardware are not so dissimilar that like there's no fucking reason we shouldn't be able to just like re-download these on the Switch. Like it was an intentional fucking choice on Nintendo's part to go, we're not doing Virtual Console anymore. We're not doing the eShop anymore. Like you can download games on the Switch, like fine, whatever. But like their back catalog is going to be whatever they decide to give us on the subscription only online service, or they're not giving it to us at all. And this was intentional. It's not a matter of like, oh, we couldn't make the tech work. It was, we are moving to a Netflix style of access to these old titles, and y'all just get to fucking deal with it. And we all know, we've talked about this many times on the podcast, that yeah, the libraries are getting better at this point. Like the SNES has got most of the titles you'd hope it would have, with some, but still some like baffling omissions. And we're never going to have a 64 or Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance library that's even like remotely comparable to what could have been downloaded from Virtual Console. So I hate that change. I've always hated that change. I think it's stupid. I think it's another example of Nintendo not understanding what their fucking consumer base wants to pay money for, because they'd be making money hand over fist if you could buy these games instead of paying to stream them.
Boy, I doubt that, because if they were making so much money doing that, they would have done that in perpetuity. But instead, they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that nobody was actually buying those games for what they wanted to sell them for. So they came up with a way to give us the games and give them a more sustainable stream of income with their online service, which I think is a better value than just buying those games piecemeal. Because I don't know how much money did you spend on, legacy titles on the Wii/Wii U/3DS?
I'd have to go back and look at it. Well, I don't have my Wii U anymore.
Like, say you bought like a dozen games, which I think would be on the high end of retro titles being bought on those services, that's what, like $120 if you're buying like NES games, which are like $8 a pop, and then like what I think the N64 is like 15. Like it kind of went up and down. They explored the scale based on the value, the actual. I mean, oftentimes they charged what they thought people would pay, and people did pay it. But I mean, $20 a year for the base level of Switch Online, and you're getting a ton of games from the NES and SNES, and with the expansion pack getting the Game Boy Advance and N64, like there's a ton of games. I've played more games on my Switch with their Switch Online than I ever played on the Wii U and 3DS. So, I mean, it is different. I agree with you that it is different when it comes to their legacy titles and doing virtual console, back and pack kind of stuff. But that was always sort of a separate. When I was talking about the eShop and the Wii U and 3DS one specifically, I was talking more about the games that were actually 3DS games, like made for that hardware, and Wii U games made for that hardware. And it would be nice. I don't know. Like it definitely would not be a one size fits all solution, but I'm sure they could, and they have ported some 3DS games to Wii or to Switch. So I would just rather have them do that in a way that makes it more for the console itself, as opposed to looking at your screen and seeing two screens. Like I don't want that shit. Like that sounds awful to me. I don't want to play a 3DS emulator on my Switch, right? So I don't know what the solution for that is, and they did not have the infrastructure in place with the account system. You could not. Okay, so Chris, you're talking about how you have these games permanently. If your 3DS gets dropped in a puddle, you do not have those games anymore because you cannot get your profile onto a different 3DS. You would just be fucked. So at what point do you just say, okay, you know what? Screw it. I already gave Nintendo my money. I'm going to download those games in any way I can. And you'd be justified in doing that, I think, because you already paid them their blood money.
And we keep doing it. And at the end of the day, this is just another instance in a long line of anti-consumer practices that this company has employed. We don't let these other companies get away with this kind of thing. Nintendo is the one company that just gets a freaking pass, and we can make a big stink, but it doesn't make a difference, and we don't vote with our wallet. And we've been talking about this for years now at this point. But let me tell you what my week was like with this, because Nick, I agree with you that there are ways to play these games. If you want to play the games, you'll find a way you can play the games. And there are so many games out there. I will not ever play all of them. I will not play a fraction of them. I don't want to play a fraction of them. You know, I want to play a fraction of the fraction of a fraction of them. But the 3DS thing for me is mostly about Pokemon. As someone who is slowly working on their Pokemon home, okay, trying to work on his own living decks, trying to do what Chris has already put in the blood, sweat, and tears to do, this really did matter to me. I had already dealt with bank years. I've had bank for years. We talked about it a few months back about my experience finally transferring from bank to home. But I needed Poke Transporter, which would let me transfer from Gens 1 and 2. I think the only legit way to get a Celebi is in Pokemon Crystal on the 3DS and then transfer it out to home. So like those things matter to me. Maybe Pokemon Go, you can do certain things.
You can get a Celebi in Pogo.
Until they get rid of those little Pokemon Go stamps that sit in Pokemon Home, I don't give a shit. Those are dead to me. I only want mainline games.
Those are fake Pokemon. Let's be honest.
Eugenicist, fucking Aryan race, Cantonian over here.
Pure blood Pikachu.
Go play Pokemon Fire Red Rocket Edition. You're hitting right on the money there, pal. So this week, guys, I needed to go in and download Poke Transporter and just sort of brush up. Like, one of my favorite games ever is on this console, Fire Emblem Awakening. So, like, I went in and made sure I had all the DLC packs so that it was just, like, on my unit and, like, whatever. Spent a few bucks doing that. I bought, like, Pokemon trading card game just to kind of do it. I had the FOMO, and I'm guilty of that, okay? I'm a fucking mark. But this fucking experience, getting everything I needed on this 3DS. So, first of all, to download Pokemon Transporter, which is a part of Pokemon Bank, but distinctly different. It lets you transfer from prior generations on the DS, as well as the eShop Gens 1 and 2. Okay, great. Well, you can't just go into the fucking eShop and download it. You have to open Bank with a subscription, a paid subscription, because Poke Transporter is no longer available now that Pokemon Bank is still free, which is great. So if you have 3DS games, you can still get them to your Switch. Awesome. They should support that as long as they possibly can. Great. Poke Transporter, that's not the case. So I was already paying for a subscription to Bank, and I have for fucking ever. It was like $5 a year or whatever. I went in to download Poke Transporter, but when I opened Pokemon Bank, it says that I don't have a save file that's compatible with Pokemon Bank. So then it just loops me back to the start screen. So I was like, wait, what? Like, yes, I do. So I popped in a physical copy of, I don't know if I put in a Ruby or if I put in Pokemon Y. Didn't work. So I put the other game in. Didn't work. So I look it up. And they're like, oh yeah, if you don't have any Pokemon available to transfer, it'll just loop you like that. So I pop in Y and so I go catch a Pokemon because all I had in there was like my one party Pokemon, right? So I couldn't transfer anything. So I go catch a Pokemon, still get the endless loop. So I have to restart my copy of Pokemon Y, get to a point where I like get the Pokedex and then catch a Pokemon. And then it'll let me set up through Pokemon Bank. It'll let me set up the whole bank experience. Great. So then it gets me to a submenu. Finally, after all this bullshit, trying to figure it out, it is not clear. I get a screen that lets me download Pokemon Transporter. Awesome. But to even download it, it says we have to link this game to like one of your other games. And I had Pokemon Crystal, and I'm thinking, is it gonna make me like back all my Pokemon up into Pokemon Transporter right now? Because I don't want to do that. Like I'm still in the middle of a playthrough on Pokemon Crystal that I started within the last few months. So I had to go buy Pokemon Yellow on the eShop. I spent another $10, started that game, caught some fucking Pokemon, and then went through and connected or did whatever, they wanted to do to Pokemon Yellow. Well, they didn't want to actually transfer. They just wanted to like verify that like I had a compatible save. But I didn't know that because they don't explain that. So now they squeezed another $10 out of me to finally get my Pokemon Transporter working. So anyway, I have my Pokemon Bank, I have my Pokemon Transporter. That's important to me because I'm still going for my living dex because I'm a fucking mark. But then, and I don't know if this has actually been corrected yet, but then today, Pokemon Transporter is no longer working without an active Pokemon Bank subscription. But you can't get an active Pokemon Bank subscription because they completely killed the service. So they fucking fooled everybody into thinking Pokemon Transporter would even still be a thing after basically telling people, like, if you want it, you better go take care of it now to squeeze out a few more $5 fucking subscriptions. It is so unbelievably scummy. So I don't know if it's been fixed. They need to fucking fix it if they haven't, because they were very clear in their messaging across multiple regions that if you want Pokemon Transporter, you need an active bank subscription. And now it's not working? That's a class action lawsuit, dude. It drives me fucking insane. So that was a couple of hours spent dealing with that. Extremely frustrating. But, and let me rant about this for a second, guys. And I know I'm down bad. I said it in the group chat. When I was doing the 09 record, I sold off 85% of my collection at what I thought was at the time was the pinnacle, the peak of the market. I made out like a bandit on my collection. But one of the items I sold for about $185 was the Fire Emblem Fates Special Edition that has a cartridge that contains all 3 versions of Fire Emblem Fates, because they went the Pokemon route, where they split Birthright, Conquest, and Revelations into 3 different paths. They sold 2 versions, and Revelations with the DLC only.
Repeat again for me how much you sold that for?
$185.
Oh no.
Plus shipping.
EJ,
Yep.
no.
I know. Oh, I know.
What's it going for now?
I mean, it's not like that. I mean, it is more, obviously, but it's not
Tell me,
complete
Nick.
in box. I'm looking at $640.
Buy it now or an auction?
That is price charting.
Oh, price charting. Okay, so currently on eBay,
800, 600, 450, 680. I mean,
and there's a lot of like cartridge only or like cartridge and box only. When I looked the other day, I was like $1,000 listings all over the place. And I was like, well, what if I want a copy that's just the cartridge in the box and not like all of the extras? $500-$600 region. Anyway, that sucks. But I sold it because it's one of those games that was just a time and place thing. I was coming off of Awakening, and I started it and I just wasn't like fully ready for another Fire Emblem game. So I shelved it. And when it came time to raise money for the record, I just said, like, anything that I have not played or have like a real attachment to, like, I want to play this one day, and or this is collectible, is not reason enough to keep it. So it went in the sell pile. And that was one of those games. Well, now I'm like, I'm on a little bit of a Fire Emblem kick thanks to Engage, and I'm like, I kind of want to just complete my Fire Emblem physical collection. Like, I love Fire Emblem. Let me just sort of scratch the collector's itch a little bit and pick up some of these old games. And they're all expensive. And then I said, no, I'll wait. I'll emulate them first. I'll play them. If I complete it, if I'm into it, then I'll go shell out the few $100s for a physical copy one day. So anyway, I was telling myself, well, I'll go download the complete edition of Fire Emblem Fates on the eShop just to fucking have a copy tied to my account. So here's another fucking can of worms, guys. They
I know this worm.
they never sold a complete edition of this game, except for in the special edition, which at the time cost, I think it only cost like $80 or something. I luckily got a pre-order for it. So you could even go to the eShop and buy all. Like you had to buy a version, play through a specific chapter before the DLC even opens up. And this is all the Fire Emblem games, by the way. Awakening, Shadows of Valencia, and Fates. You have to play through, 6 chapters is like hours of the game to even unlock the portal to get the fucking DLC.
You don't buy the DLC in the eShop, you buy it from the game itself. It was very strange. Nintendo clearly did not know how to sell DLC and what was the realistic way they should be doing that. Yeah, it's very strange.
I'm telling myself, well, maybe I'll pick up a copy of Conquest. It's still $40 on Amazon. And I'll play through it and get the DLC. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that to go spend another $50 on DLC. This is fucking dumb. And that's why I started looking at the cartridge. I was like, well, I'll go spend $300 to get the cartridge back if I want to. Well, nope. $1,000 later, I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Don't.
I'm
EJ,
not. I see.
Don't fucking.
I'm not
do
going
this.
to. I'm not going to.
No, EJ, yes, you will because you're fucking sick. Don't do it.
Don't buy Fates, not because it's expensive, but because it's a mid game that most Fire Emblem fans don't even like that much.
Here's the thing, though. That's what I thought, which is why I didn't
on a console you don't like.
Well, I know, but Fire Emblem Awakening was just, I love it so much. Here's the thing. A lot of people say it's mid and they don't like it. But they also said that about Three Houses, and then they also said that about Engage. And I'm like, these are all great fucking games. So maybe I gotta, I'm at a point where I don't let so much of the poison of the outside world affect me. And so I'm like, maybe I would end up loving that game just with a little more distance between Awakening. So anyway, I'm doing some work for a client who I know owns this. And I literally yesterday reached out and said, I will do the rest of this project we're in the middle of if you trade me that game, and I will waive the rest of the payment on this invoice if you trade me this game. And he is considering it. So we'll see how that works out. We'll see. I price chart. I showed him the price chart. I wasn't pulling anything scammy. I said, this is what the game's worth. If you trade this to me, we'll call it even Stevens, and you can always buy a copy another day.
It will go up in price too. I don't think this is a game that's going to drop. Like you said, the Fire Emblem games historically are low print run, highly sought after by weirdos like you. So it will always, fetch a high price. It's just weird. I'm looking at this spike in March of 2022. It was 198 was like the average loose, and then in April of 2022. The average price for loose is $387.
That's when they announced the closure, isn't it?
They specifically announced that they will be removing Fire Emblem Fates from the eShop in most regions. They didn't do it in America, but most regions, Japan, Europe, they removed Fates from the eShop a month prior to the eShop's closure, citing consumers have to play through Chapter 6. So if we take it down a month early, that gives people who bought it that month to buy the DLC. So that's when they announced that, I think, and that's what caused the spike.
Yeah, double in price.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's only gone up since then. So this is just endemic of Nintendo, like I said earlier, being completely anti-consumer, being completely out of fucking touch with reality, not knowing how, even if we are literally lining up with shovels and pitchforks fucking hauling cash into dump trucks for these pieces of shit, and they still can't figure out how to most optimally take our money. And I know, Nick, you said, they don't owe us anything, and we don't owe them anything. And, to a degree, you are correct. But, piracy is not that accessible to most casual fans. We'll figure it out. If I want to play a game that costs $1,000 to buy, I personally will find another way to play it if I want to play it that badly.
I just think of your brother not even figuring out how to get the Elden Ring mod to work on his computer. Obviously, it is a technology sort of understanding of how these things can work. But people can watch a YouTube video. It's not that hard, and it's more accessible than jumping through the hoops that you've been jumping through just to get some damn Pokemans onto your on your Pokemon Home or whatever your final destination is for these motherfuckers.
Nintendo does not owe us anything. Sure, we also don't owe Nintendo anything if they're not going to be up to industry standard. And I I don't think it's
yet?
unreasonable, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that a company that's worth $1 quadrillion, who's been doing this for longer than any of their major competitors who are still in the game, is still so fucking far behind everyone else in terms of how to like make an easily navigatable fucking shop. Like, the eShop is still the absolute worst online storefront for games. Period. Full stop. That's ridiculous.
PS5 shop's pretty bad too. The very little I've seen of it or interacted with it.
PS5 is annoying because there are so many screens.
Yeah, it's like tabs on tabs, and like half of them are just ads. I have no complaints about the current eShop, except it doesn't have a fun musical jingle, and that's like the only complaint.
They still don't have carts. I can't add games to my cart. I have to buy a game and then go back to the eShop to fucking look at more games. Like, I can't even just keep a fucking tab of all the things I want to buy at the end of this experience. And if you go more than 2 pages in, the entire fucking thing crashes. It's a disaster, and we're 6 years in to the fucking console. Like, it is better, Nick, than the 3DS and the Wii U, which I also turned on the other night. I didn't buy anything on the Wii U because anything worth buying on the Wii U has already come to the Switch and I own it. But
remind yourself, dust off those rose-colored glasses and actually remember how it was, because that's how it was all the time, if not worse.
I gotta say, man, the Wii U holds a special place in my heart. It was the console that sort of brought me back into games in a big way.
Mario Kart 8 and Smash 4 and Splatoon were all fantastic titles.
Right. And
Nintendo Land.
And Nintendo Land. Top 100? No, that got axed.
And like 3 or 4 of the games in Nintendo Land.
It was the console that I like took to college with me. Like my first year at college, moving down and like being in a new city, and it was just like me and Sarah and my Wii U, dude. And it was just like, it was good vibes. And so I know the console's been dead for a long time, but it was nice to revisit it and like officially put it to bed. But as far as the 3DS stuff goes, it is still relevant to me. And it's relevant to a lot of people. Again, it just goes to show how fucking far Nintendo is from being a competent fucking company. And for a goddamn multi-billion-dollar company, it's just ridiculous. We still sit here, we're going to talk about fucking Zelda after this, and we're going to buy that on day one. And I know, Chris, you and I have been a lot better. Nick, I think you've always been pretty discerning with your purchases when it comes to what you will and won't support. But, the Switch got that collector fucking sicko mode activated in your brain a little bit even, just like Chris and I. So I think we've been better. At least I have. Chris, you've talked about it. We've been better about not giving these companies our money when they really fucking do something awful and anti-consumer. Like we've talked about with Pokemon. That shit's still the quickest selling fucking goddamn game. And it was a disaster. I know Pokemon Company and Nintendo are different, but it's this vicious cycle. They're never going to figure it out if we keep, as consumers, doing what we've been doing. I mean, for Christ's sake, they announced this goddamn 16-year-old fucking shop is going down. And what does Gerard the Completionist do? He goes out and spends another $30,000, It's Nintendo's like, oh, cha-ching, like cashing it at the last second because people are fucking sick. It's just, Nick, I looked into eShop, so like my rage when in the group chat this week has sort of tempered. I was like, okay, eShop is like a pretty legit little setup. It's very easy to use. Games are very accessible. It's even in sort of the style of like if you want to go and download things from their servers, like just treat it like the literal eShop, or you can just load an SD card, whatever. There's nothing really that I'm missing out on the 3DS that I just can't live without. Like, I fucking hate that console. But there's even a way, I found this out after the Poke Transporter bullshit. There's a way.
I was going to say, there's probably a way to get like all your Pokemon off a save.
Yes, there is. So
yeah, there's been Pokemon cloning, and like, I remember there was an app that you could get on smartphones that you would just say, hey, I want a Celebi with these stats, whatever. And then you could connect it to your 3DS and trade it to yourself if you really wanted it. Like, that's been wide open for years.
But people like Chris and I want our Pokemon.
No, totally. I understand. I get it.
My rage simmered a little bit, but it was not a pleasant trip down memory lane opening that thing back up and reveling in just a shitty fucking console. The nub and the circle pad and the goddamn capacitive fucking touchscreen. It's just such a piece of shit. With 240p resolution or some bullshit, it's just so bad. It's just so bad.
I think the top screen is 500 by 300. I think it's something like easy rounded like that. It's like a 5x3. Yeah, but yeah,
it's bad.
Ancient.
And it sucks that like so many awesome games are trapped on that console. There's a lot of fucking all-time great fucking games on that console. There's stuff for everybody. And the games only held back by what a piece of shit the console was. And the fact that they iterated to death on that thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it all led to the Switch, and the Switch is really something great. So whatever. I'm sick of Nintendo. And we're going to go from this right into more Nintendo.
Well, just to cap things off, I just really wanted to reiterate that I do hope that some of the heavy hitters that were good games but held back by maybe the quality of the system, I hope those do get up, like, you know, proper ports to the Switch and whatever comes after on the Nintendo, you know, cycle of systems. Even things from the DS that maybe I don't have as much of a fond like memory of could easily get moved over with a little bit of TLC. Obviously, there was a lot of games that utilized the 2-screen gimmick to great effect on those systems, but it sucks that those games have to live on a 2-screen system. And we've seen some games from third parties get moved over to like mobile phone, and that's maybe not my ideal way to play these games either. I mean, obviously, it's just a different vibe. My phone is my phone, and my computer is my computer. My Switch is my Switch. These are all things that I have a different relationship with, and that changes the way I interact with them as a gaming device. So I hope that we can bring those games forward onto a dedicated gaming console in some aspect. Especially, Chris would probably agree, something like Metroid: Samus Returns. I think that would be great on Switch. There's nothing on that makes it have to be on the 3DS.
Not at all. It's just a good ass remake of a game and a proof of concept for a lot of the systems in Dread. I would love to see that on Switch.
I know there's a larger conversation to be had here about like not just video games. You know, I know there's a whole court case going on about like the Internet Archive, but when talking about archiving video games, I don't know what the solution is. These companies you would think would be an advocate for themselves to some degree, but again, if it's not making them money, they don't care. And there's tons of things being lost in the fucking ether and to time. It just disappear forever. And we're getting to a point where like there has to be some sort of meaningful legislation at some point creating some recourse legally for people to like properly archive these things and have a database that's accessible. And I just don't know how, I don't know what that looks like, especially given like we practically have these fucking monopolies running. I don't know, but there's a conversation there.
There is, and we're seeing in real time like the consequences of the early stages of any industry's relative success or failure in cataloging and preserving their own shit. Like how many fucking times do we have these like remakes, remasters, whatever, like with Tales of Symphonia that they're like, we literally don't, and that isn't even like that old of a game in terms of like some of these like really old physical titles from the 80s. They literally don't have the code for the GameCube Tales of Symphonia anymore. It's just gone. And I don't know what ever really occurred to folks, especially in the earlier days, to be saving any of that stuff. Because, I mean, it was sort of like the Wild West, at least at Atari, by all accounts, with all the like drugs and crazy shit that they were doing over there. But I don't think there was any thought as to this could be a moment in history, and like whoever really knows that. But now we're paying the price for it. And yeah, I'm with you. Like the way that Nintendo especially, but a lot of other companies treat these internet archives, they're like, that's ours. You can't have that. Like, well, you're not taking care of it. And like, this is an historical artifact at this point, and like people deserve to have it. And it's just, yeah, it's fucking fascinating to me.
Yeah. And it really sucks because you can trace a lot of this back to the horrendous effects of the DMCA and the effect that the power that the RIAA and the MPAA had in the late 90s and early 2000s when it came to Napster and just, you know, peer-to-peer sharing of music and movies back then. And it's turned these video games into like they are offered and sold and treated as if they are ephemeral. Like they are experiential. They're a digital roller coaster that you go on, you pay for admission, but you're not paying to keep this thing. And that's been the case with albums. Like you buy an album, you don't own that album. You own a lease on the album, like the temporary rights to listen to it,
the license to it, to that medium.
Yeah, it's like you're lucky that we let you listen to this in the car with somebody else sitting in the car. Like, you motherfucker.
If they could police that, they would. 100%.
Like it's to the point where it's like illegal to set up a projector and watch a movie on the side of a wall because more than 3 people might show up, and it's like then it's a gang activity or something. Like, what the it is absurd. Absolutely ridiculous. It is absurd. You're totally correct. And to the point where these video game companies are also lobbying against libraries being able to have like video games on the shelves because they're products that are to be sold, not, media to be watched and to learn from, where we don't treat books in that way. We don't treat even old movies in that way. But it starts like getting into they're crossing a line when it comes to entertainment software or even like music albums. It's really, I don't understand it at all.
We're not that
Money.
far removed. Exactly. We're not that far removed from Microsoft's like all-time terrible, like Wii Music terrible E3, where they were like, oh yeah, the Xbox One is going to have like a really rigid game sharing system where you can only use it for like a certain amount of time, or it's only going to load a certain amount of content on the console before they have to pay for the full title, and got absolutely crucified for it and abandoned it. Sony with like one of the all-time clapback videos of the like PlayStation 5 game sharing system. And it's one guy handing a game to another guy and he says, here you go. And the other guy says, thanks. And then that's the end of the video. We're not that far removed from that. They would do it if they could.
7 years later, both these manufacturers sell a console that cannot play discs. And suddenly it seems like the Xbox One proposed method would have actually been a better way to actually, because you could share digital games with the Xbox One. That was what was proposed, which in hindsight is like, yeah, actually that seems like a good idea, but everyone got so butt mad about always online that they couldn't move past that. So I don't know what could have been. It might have been a good thing.
Always online is just still not feasible. Like there are so many places in the world that like, consistent and quality internet connection is not accessible. Like it was still a bad move
country.
10 years ago.
In this country.
Exactly. So yeah, 10 years ago was a bad move. But Nick, you were right. They were on to something in sort of some of the proposed features of that system that like you could say that would maybe work well, but it was wrapped up in this bullshit package that like, especially in 2013, was like kind of a stretch. Less so in 2023, but still not. I mean, it's anti-consumer, and we're seeing like streaming companies do this now. Where like if your device doesn't connect to your home Wi-Fi router once a month, like you get locked out of the account you're paying for, in a way to crack down on password sharing. I understand to a degree, like especially streaming companies, they end up bleeding money.
It's their own fucking fault. They're bleeding money. They've been chasing an Oscar for like 10 years, dumping all this fucking money into prestige cinema, Netflix has. And now they're like, we need to make sure only the people who are paying for the account are using the account. Like, come on. Like, it's their own fucking fault. I have no sympathy for that. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't give a fuck. I should be able to log in to whatever fucking device I want and the service I'm paying money for and access it. And I think that also goes for, like, I want to be able to log into a different Switch if, like, my Switch is left at home instantly and easily.
Seriously.
And be able to play all my fucking software that I paid money for. Like, it's not that hard.
No. And Sony figured it out in fucking 2011 or whatever with the Vita.
Yeah, and Switch does the same thing. So, I mean, it is as capable as any Sony home console has been for the past, like, 15 years. So, at least they've got that right. I mean, that is like, obviously people try to goose the system by having two consoles and sharing the software between them. And like I said, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is the bogeyman here. Like that is the thing that they can like hang their hat on and be like, hey, you only bought one copy of this game, so you get one copy of this game. If you wanted to share the game, you could have bought it physically, which is like, I mean, yeah, you'd be one of those weirdos who buys physical games and you're obviously like behind the times because digital is so much more convenient. I don't have to get up off the couch and change out a cartridge because that's so hard. I know my rights.
As someone who has physical copies of most of his games and has also bought second digital copies, just out of convenience of not having to carry a card or swap a card out, because I am a mark. Anyway, two things is one, yes, Chris, the idea that like these companies are shooting themselves in the foot and then turning around and putting it on the consumers because of their own missteps and their own lack of fucking awareness. Nintendo especially guilty of that. And Nick, to your point about like even just cloud saves and being able to share like my profile between consoles, it doesn't work that well. I owned a fucking Switch Lite, and if they had actually had a system that works seamlessly the way Sony's has for so long, I would have kept that Switch Lite because that's a fucking fantastic little device. But their whole system is garbage and doesn't let you play anything without an internet connection. So And I know there's like a workaround where if you make your Switch Lite the primary console and then your home console, but then like certain games like Pokemon and like Animal Crossing, because they're so afraid of people cheating, that it shouldn't work the way it does. And so anyway, the whole idea that it's just these massive billion-dollar companies making poor decision after poor decision, if it isn't the consequences of my actions, why don't we charge the consumers more? And it's fucking bullshit. That's all I got to say on that.
Just slightly related, I just wanted to mention that EA is also delisting a couple games, and people were upset about it because it was like Mirror's Edge was one of them that they were going to delist because there was like a leaderboard system. And they're like, hey, wait a second, that's like a single player game. Why are you delisting it? Because these other games are online. And they backpedaled on that, whatever. I don't know. Zelda, we got a gameplay little preview, little 10-minute, 13-minute thing. We got Mr. Aonuma with his cool haircut still playing some Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, question. I always get confused when I watch anime because you know how Japanese puts the surname, it's reversed from, English names. But like anime, like dubbed anime, like some of them switch the surname so that it works for English brains, but some don't. Is he Mr. Aonuma?
Yeah.
Or is okay.
Generally, when you refer to a Japanese adult, you would go by their family name. So it'd be Aonuma-san. Mr. Aonuma, if you're speaking English.
So Eiji is his first name.
Yes.
And so when we get that, they're just doing
his
the
given
flip
name,
for us.
whatever. Yeah. I mean, it'd probably be listed in Japanese as Aonuma Eiji.
Okay.
Shigeru,
Okay. See, I never know what's what. So I'm like, who? Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Total
Irrelevant.
aside there. Some Japanese, me reaching back into the ether of me taking Japanese in high school. Yeah, we got some gameplay. They showed off at least 3 new abilities that are going to be relevant in this game. Did not see any of the previous Sheikah Slate abilities, which I thought was notable. I feel like that was I feel like we're not going to be using the Sheikah Slate stuff. We're not going to be having Stasis or Cryonis or, any of those 4 main things. Maybe a bomb equivalent or something. Because the bombs were pretty impactful as far as being able to, well, mostly just for the ability to blow shit up for mining, but maybe they figured that the Ultra Hand stuff with fusing items and making hammers on the fly is equivalent enough. But yeah, they showed Recall, which is the thing that we've seen before where Link sends things backwards in time. Like the thing that they showed was the object falling from the Sky Island and then him riding it up like a cool little elevator.
So fucking
They showed
tight.
Ultra Hand. Yeah, super tight. The Ultra Hand, which is like a powered up magnesis, seems like it's literally from the hand that we've seen grabbing him like in the trailers that came out of spooky mummified Ganon's chest. And then we saw Ascend, which is what Link has used to go through objects, as I wrote, raptured his way, back to his home planet, and kitty priding through ceilings to get to the top of caves or, any other thickness that is between you and the top world.
Thickness.
So what did you guys think? EJ?
I still have a lot of concerns. All my concerns that we talked about at the last Direct are still valid. They really haven't shown enough of the world for me to like really understand like what is this game about? What's the real incentive to like be back in this world? I thought there was some interesting stuff in the new mechanics. I will say I'm just like a little worried that like they're kind of just making a lot of the things I didn't like about the first game even more tedious. They're really blowing the doors wide open on the crafting system and adding the fusion. And like the fusion is like kind of an interesting answer to some of my issues with the first game with weapon durability and like making the resources you collect from monsters more important, which is something that I kind of postulated or hoped out loud that they would do. Like it gives a little more meaning to all of those things you're collecting from every meaningless monster you kill, and not just like, well, you get another stick because your other one breaks every time you hit a monster. So that's like kind of an interesting response, and I don't know enough yet to know how that is going to exactly work. To me, it feels like maybe it's just going to make it more tedious. But then I think, man, how creative people got in Breath of the Wild using the Sheikah Slate, this really opens the doors. But I also think, given the nature of the fusion technique, that they're going to have to be really careful to not let the game get broken. So I feel like it's not going to be, people are not going to be able to be as creative, and it's going to be pretty rigid in like how that is actually implemented and what you're allowed to do. And I think it has to be. Otherwise, you could just completely break the game. So I didn't see enough to like be excited, but I'm interested that like, okay, they're answering some of the questions we had about the first game, and at least seemingly attempting to fix some of the things that like people found obnoxious largely. I'm just kind of worried that like, okay, this is like more shit to manage, more vaguely obnoxious things that get in the way of the things I really liked about Breath of the Wild. But it's also things that people will probably love and loved about Breath of the Wild. And so it's just maybe just not as much for me and the things they're leaning into in this game. Because, yeah, I saw like the time reversal thing and like I was like, okay, like I've definitely done this.
I totally get what you're saying. And you're absolutely right. This was totally focused on the gameplay of those 3 systems in particular and like a little bit with the Ultra Hand as far as like fusing stuff and how that relates to equipment and durability and sort of like you said being like an alm for that wound if that was something that wounded you, and yeah, you're totally right. We did not see anything with like the greater systems at play in this game. We don't see anything about shrines or dungeons or what the world looks like from like a larger scope. We saw like a little bit of that Sky Island and some like new enemy types, which is like always welcome. I think that was obviously one of the largest like real honest complaints about the first one was that there wasn't enough enemy variety, especially for a Zelda game. Chris, what did you think of this gameplay trailer, teaser, demo thing?
EJ, I think you're on the money here that like some of the things that are not for you are still not going to be for you, but I think that they did take some like clear and actionable steps to mitigate a lot of the things that people didn't like lugging a quadrillion monster parts around that you're never going to use. Like the fact that they're all potentially like really useful, like Keese eyeballs. I don't think I used that in crafting one time in Breath of the Wild. Homing arrows? Give me all the bats. I want to kill all the bats.
That's
I need
really
this.
cool.
And between that and the fusion technique, and between upper hand or underhand or overhand or whatever the fuck it's called, cool hand.
However
link.
you like it, baby.
Cool hand link.
The Ultra Hand.
Cool hand link.
Thanks, EJ. I was like, oh, that just got lost in the shuffle. They are showing us, I like that they only showed us a little bit, because what that's going to do is get us excited. Many of us, I'm excited about, I can't wait to find all this stuff. And I was looking when he killed all those little like sentry drones at the items he was picking up and going, I wonder what I can make with those.
Zonai, and also like lore drops and stuff like that. You know, lore tubers are going to be going crazy, which, you know, I like watching a little bit of lore YouTube because, you know, it is where people can just like totally flex about their knowledge and crap. But
Nick watches YouTube?
not like a lot, but like occasionally.
Nick watches YouTube!
I'll pull up a Vati video talking about, you know, Bloodborne and how Gurman is totally fucked up, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, little stuff.
But yeah.
Yeah, so it encourages curiosity and exploration with the fusion system, mitigating some of people's complaints with weapon durability. It was kind of shocking, honestly, to see like putting a shitty thing on a shitty thing makes it not shitty and gives you like a buff. Like the stick went from having like 4 hits worth of durability or whatever to an indeterminate number with just like a rock. I was like, that's fucking tight. Like, that's cool. I like that in the early going. Eventually it's going to reach a point where I'm putting like OP weapons on OP weapons just because I can. And that's great.
Or a stick on a longer stick to make the longest stick.
The longest stick.
How long can you make it?
When it was tucked behind the shield and just this gigantic stick and the gigantic picture, I was like, this is so dumb. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So that's my quick hit. I think that they showed me enough in terms of the Sky Islands are going to be like so much more substantive than I thought they were. Just based on what they showed us, I thought it was going to be, because I just played it, I thought it was going to be more like Skyward Sword, which is literally just Wind Waker in the sky with a whole bunch of blank fucking space and nothing to do in it. And I thought it was going to be that. And it really doesn't look like that just based on the little bits that they gave us, unless they gave us some of the like bigger islands and there's not like a ton of that to do. But again, I think I think it's going to be substantive. And I think that's going to be the big thing, and why they don't want to show us the world yet is they want us to have that moment where we see it when it happens, all the terrain get fucking ripped up, and go explore that and figure it out for ourselves. And I fuck with that. We're buying this game anyway, so why not?
I really hope this, we will talk about it, but I hope this doesn't tie too much into prior games, the way we speculated about Breath of the Wild, and then thankfully it didn't. I don't want to lose out on anything cool because I didn't play Skyward Sword, but My thing with the systems and some of the new powers, my thing that we've just beat into the ground, my beef with Breath of the Wild is whatever you think about individual systems, crafting, weapon durability, the side quest, collecting a million fucking Koroks, like whatever, whichever system it is.
Yeah.
There's a serious problem with the reward for doing something.
The economy.
Right. Quite imbalanced, but also I do not want to be managing now even more so. I got weapon durability, and now I also have to be thinking like, how am I going to fuse these weapons together, like to like do what I need to do in this fight? Like, I don't want to manage all of those things simultaneously. If it's there for people who like that, cool. But if you're going to like make those sort of things mandatory, and you're going to make me go into my menu even more now,
I think what they showed in this teaser is exactly what that is, because the combat in Zelda has never been like this intensive, mechanically, driven sort of series of combat encounters. It's never, super specific about your timing. I mean, even more so in Breath of the Wild, it was more specific on the timing because they gave you that parry, which was awesome. I don't know if you remember reflecting back a guardian laser into its eye and it's exploding and it feeling like having that sound and that time. Beautiful. Slowdown. Lovely. Love to see it. But Zelda games is all about the creativity and the way you approach these combat encounters and using different items, especially in older games where you had specific items in a dungeon where I just played Minish Cap, obviously, and you get the gust jar, and then you could suck up the powder off these mushrooms and blow it back at them, and that's how you fight them because the sword doesn't do anything. So that is like an essential part of Zelda, is approaching these combat encounters in a creative way and using your creativity to say, what can I do to affect this monster? What am I doing wrong? How do I do it right? And having that, that click of like, I did it. I know what I can do from now on, and you have surpassed this enemy.
EJ, I'm sorry. I don't want to badly paraphrase you. So if you could like briefly give me that take again, and then I will respond to it. Just that, because I want to respond to that.
if I'm in a fight and I got, 7 dudes fighting me, and I'm constantly pausing my game to swap out a new weapon.
Why are you fighting 7 dudes?
Did you guys play the same game?
You cannot tell me a game designed systems to be used in the game, which they pretty fucking clearly intended to be a core part of the game experience because they designed it, and then say, how dare this game make me use its systems? That is a baddie take. That is the most insane take you've ever had on this podcast.
My point is that it's bad game design to interrupt the thing that you want me to do, which is I'm in an enemy encounter, I'm fighting these things. And Nick, what you said makes total sense. Zelda has always been about how do you think methodically and use your creativity in these encounters. But when it thrusts you into an encounter and then you're constantly stopping to like deal with the systems are no longer supporting the gameplay. The system is getting in the way of the gameplay.
It's literally like 5 seconds. Like what game did you play? Honest to God. Like you are the only person I've ever heard have any of these complaints about this game. Like it just seems more that it's like not for you than it's like bad game design. That's nuts. And like the crafting system is a core experience to the whole part of the game and the storytelling of the game, which we've already covered. We're on another fucking Breath of the Wild rant because the fucking sequel's coming out. So like it's inevitable, I guess. But like crafting is a core part of this whole game. Of course, you would have to craft to progress through areas where you don't have armor that's going to give you resistance to heat or cold. That is literally a key part of the game. And if you don't like the system, that's fine, but it's not bad game design. It just means you don't like the way the game is requiring you to engage with it to progress through it in that moment.
The way the systems are rolled out and the way the UI is designed and the way that it's constantly forcing you to like go manage tedious things, the idea that the enemy types are only a certain way because it supports the idea that you have to always pick up a weapon. Okay, but then there's no system, which this game might answer, like there's no system for actually repairing your weapons.
I never needed repairable weapons. I always had too many weapons. I mean, I never was like running out of weapons.
So what's the reward? What's the reward for exploring and doing side quests? The beauty of it? There has to be an incentive.
Yeah, and I do agree. I like adding more, things to do with the monster parts, because I think the only things you really use them for in the previous game were upgrading armor at the fairy fountains and maybe trading stuff in with Keaton, the weird monster guy on the top right of the map. Can't remember specifically. It's been 6 years since I've deeply played that game. So yeah, I think it'll be cool to have these like on the fly. it is really like the moments that I enjoyed the most were like the on the fly, make a decision and follow it through sort of gameplay things that arose from these systems mechanically. So like having the fire on the ground and paragliding up off of that so that you can get a time shot, get some headshots off on these like moblins that are surrounded you. Like if you got into an encampment and you got surrounded, you're trying to go quiet, and then things got loud. Like those are the kinds of things that I found rewarding, was expressing my own sort of desires and like playing with the systems and like being freeform with it. Those were the things I liked about it. But EJ, I do understand where you're coming from, where it didn't have like the, like, I don't know what would be the reward in that. In a game this big with like this many things to do and this variety of locations. Obviously they had these encampments for combat because they wanted to implement a more push and pull with the gaining and losing of weapons with the durability, which was key to the overall thesis of the game. I think I do think that Zelda would not be a good game without the durability. I think if you had weapons that lasted forever, then there'd be no incentive to get new weapons, and to like being forced to use a weapon that you don't like as much as another weapon makes it feel better for you to get the weapon that you do like again. So I think that as a design like aspect, I thought that worked really well for me.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and it obviously worked for you, and we've established our thoughts about this whole thing. It's been well tread, but opening a chest meant nothing to me after the first 8 hours of gameplay. Like I don't care, because when I'm in a fight, I'm not looking at what weapon I'm pulling up next. Like Chris said, like you just go to the next weapon and it'll fucking break too. So the incentive of exploring and finding a chest or beating a mini boss,
I think that's a little bit, I mean, even for you, I think that's a bit too reductive, because oftentimes you would find weapons and they would be much higher quality than what you're finding on like the enemies around. The enemies that you're fighting in like the early part of the game, you're getting like these rusty swords. They have no durability. They have no attack power. They have sticks. They have, these spears made out of bones. And then you find like an actual Hylian sword, like a Hyrule like soldier shield that has this awesome durability and it can defend you really well. And you feel this burst of power, and you know that it's only going to last for a little bit. It's like using a power up in like a traditional game that's like a timed power up, and you feel like a god for 30 seconds, and then it wears off and you're like, I need more of that. I need that another hit of that juice. So that's why you keep going for more chests, and you save those for the moments where you need them, where you're fighting a Talus, you're fighting a Hinox, and you're like, I need to get this like last sliver of health, and I'm going to break out my sword, and I'm going to use the good shit for a while, and then I'm going to throw it at him once it's about to break, and it explodes, and you get that satisfying sound and visual reward. And I mean, if it didn't work for you, it didn't work for you, and I can't explain you out of having that opinion, but I think it is short-sighted, and it is a bit reductive for you to say that it's bad game design, or that, I don't know, it feels like an attack on my character that I did like that,
Well, I understand that. Something that might work in a 10-hour game, a 15-hour game is one thing, but this was like a 100-hour experience. But like,
for sure.
Even things like, Chris, you collected every fucking Korok. For what reason? There was no point.
Because I'm ill. Also, once you get
I know that.
Once you get the Master Sword, durability doesn't even matter, because even when that is like uncharged, it's like, what, a 60-second cooldown, a 90-second cooldown that you have to stoop to using another weapon.
I do love the description I read online. I think it's Brian Altano who said, oh, the Master Sword just gets tired. I still love that. It's hilarious to me. Like, oh, it's got to take a little nap. It'll be better in a little bit.
My first goal in this game, when I discovered the Master Sword, my first goal, and only goal until I unlocked it, was unlocking it. And when I looked up where the fucking Hylian shield was, that was my only goal, was to get something that was going to mitigate how often I had to take myself out of the experience to deal with another system. And guess what happened? When I went to go look for the Hylian shield, I accidentally fought Ganon, and then I beat the game, and I never went back. I didn't go to the desert and do any of that stuff, because I fucking rolled credits.
And what a reward it was for you when you got that Master Sword.
The Master Sword ended up being a little underwhelming.
It's an unbreakable sword. It's like your biggest fucking concern. It literally solves it.
Well, like Nick said, it gets tired, so it's like I still have to like go in the middle of like in the Ganon fight. Oh my god. How many times did I have to fucking open my menu, find my next strongest weapon? How many times did I have to like open the menu and fucking heal by eating 19 fucking berries?
If only you'd have gauged with the crafting and cooking system more, you would have had some really great things to fully restore your health with one click from one sub menu.
Motherfucker, you think I didn't keep goddamn 80 fucking durian fruits on me at all fucking times? Come on. Who are you talking to?
But did you cook with them? Did you have like durian fruit scrambles?
Dude, I am a min-maxer, Chris, which is why I found those systems so tedious, because I needed to extract every little bit of value out of it, and I didn't have fun doing it. I just want to go explore and kill things, man. Maybe solve a puzzle here and there.
I've got the game for you, EJ. It's called Elden Ring. It is like Breath of the Wild, but without all that boring crafting crap. I mean, there actually is a little bit of crafting, but it's mostly just to get like usable items like daggers and stuff.
Bad system.
Mid-game.
Bad game design. That's a 6 out of 10 game if it had any other brand on it.
Awesome weapon variety. The weapons are impervious. They do not break. You get no story. You don't have to worry about weird cutscenes. I mean, well, yeah, you get some weird cutscenes, but not like, weird memory crap. Talk about shrines. I think that, we could go on the speculation route, and I think we've already seen the shrine equivalent in this, and I think the Sky Islands are bespoke shrine/dungeon equivalents in this game. That is my speculation. That is what I am going to assume until shown otherwise.
Shrines were so fucking cool. And that was one of the few things that you really felt an incentive to like hit every single one. Each one was unique and cleverly designed and forced you to use your powers in interesting ways. Dungeons can feel so overwhelming, right? You get into a dungeon and you just get fatigued halfway through and you're like, I don't want to finish this right now. In a fucking shrine, you never got that. You took them at your own pace. You could do as many or as little as you want. And there was always a reward. That's awesome. How do they do that, again, without completely retreading everything Breath of the Wild did? And a lot of people have like speculated that, like, well, they're going to bring proper dungeons back. Maybe like a combination of the two. I've waffled on this a lot. Like, oh, I want proper dungeons. That would be really cool. But then I think about the things that really juiced me up in Breath of the Wild. I'm like, maybe I don't want dungeons. I want shrine-like experiences back, and I want shrine-like rewards back. But can they do it on the same fucking map and make it as interesting as it was 6 years ago?
Which is why I think the early start of the game, the big thing happens. The surface of Hyrule is going to be blown up. Like all these rocks are going to shoot up in the sky, and those will be your shrines. That is going to be, we saw in the trailer, he's only got 4 hearts. He's got the 1 ring of stamina. That is starter Link. That is what you're starting out as. You're not, leveled up like you were in the previous games. That's, that's video games. We don't have to explain that. I mean, he got hurt. He got hit in the head. He got a new hand. He's got long hair. Whatever.
Is it the same Link? Are we in a different time period?
No. It's no. I'm not going to entertain that bullshit. What I will entertain is that
it's the same Link.
The Sky Islands. I mean, it's the same Link. But the Sky Islands are going to fulfill that need of having progression, long-term progression with hearts. Getting heart containers, getting stamina upgrades. Those were such a well-liked and implemented part of the previous game that they're going to maintain that. And this game, you don't have the same powers. So with these new powers, you can make a entire new set of puzzles. Like the best thing about the shrines in the previous game was that you started with the exact same tool set in every single one. And that's something you can't do with a traditional dungeon layout in a Zelda game, because every one of those dungeons in the previous Zelda games were like, here is the dungeon where you get this item, and then you use that item to solve puzzles, and then fight the big bad at the end. And then whether you use that item in other dungeons is largely immaterial unless they want to progression gate you to only do that one dungeon, and then you can't get to the next one because, a guard is blocking the west end of Hyrule. But then once you show them you can do a cool sword thing, then you can go there, but you get the cool, it's largely just to keep it linear. But Breath of the Wild was not linear. You could do any of the shrines in any order you wanted because you started from the same place at every single one. And I think they're going to do the same thing here, but with just different powers.
If the Sky Islands are look, we've exposed new shrines. I don't know. Or they've been, perverted with the energy of whatever's coming out of Hyrule Castle.
Well, the previous MacGuffin was just like, oh, we got some goop on your Sheikah slate, and then you get some goop and you trade them into a statue, and then you get more hearts. I mean, it doesn't need to be really explained that detailed, right?
No, not that detailed. I just I don't know. I have a hankering for some dungeons. That's it, and I want them to find a balance between micro and macro. And it's because I'm just coming off of Skyward Sword that I'm kind of jonesing for like a full ass dungeon. I'm looking at something like Reversal or whatever the fuck it's called, like Rewind. and just recall, thank you, and looking at like a dungeon that's just like that mechanic on steroids sounds fucking tight. Not like a trial where it takes me like 15 minutes, like a full fucking dungeon. Then give me like the little shrines also, where I get like a full heart container from doing the reversal dungeon, and I get, you know, the little goopy goop, like you said.
I do agree. I think it would be really cool for them to have better, larger dungeons. I thought the Divine Beasts had some cool ideas in the way they sort of played with how you interact with your map, because you do spend a lot of time in your map in Breath of the Wild, and then utilizing that to change the geometry of the level around you, I thought was a good concept, and then did not exactly hit all the time. And then the bosses at the end were extremely, extremely repetitive, and that was disappointing. But I think that they could alleviate a lot of the repetition that people found with the shrines. Just having different visual aesthetics, I think, goes for such a long way. And the fact that every single shrine had the same music, the same visual styling, I think that was a huge thing that people miss from dungeons, is the theming. I think it's so cool to go to a fire dungeon and to fight fire things and to have the cool fire music happening while you're doing it. That is what people missed from dungeons in the past, was just the theming. So they could do that by having, you know, here's a chunk of lava that was shot into the sky, and that is the sky island that you're, you know, traversing, and then it is themed around that. You've got fiery kind of enemies up there, and you can have a little mini fire dungeon instead of, you know, the blue neon with the haunting melodies playing in the background. That's all.
100%. I'll keep this brief. I'm the bottom line is I'm really glad I listened to my instincts and I played Skyward Sword before this game came out, because I had a feeling based on the initial trailers, like just in my really limited prior knowledge of Skyward Sword, that it shared a lot of aesthetic similarities. Obviously, the Sky Islands, Link with the long hair, the specific animation of him like falling through the sky, and I was kind of like, shit. I felt it in my bones that it's gonna have connective tissue. I finished Skyward Sword yesterday, and I was like, son of a bitch, I could not have possibly been more right after I like watched the trailer this morning. Just looking at like Demise in his final form, who's sort of the precursor to Ganon, Calamity Ganon, whatever you want to call it. Spoilers for Skyward Sword, I guess. EJ, cover your virgin ears if you feel like you need to experience this for yourself. You're going to edit it, so I don't know what you... God, can I talk about... You're going to edit the podcast,
yeah, just
you
do
doof.
Just do it. Just do it.
I'm just going to do it. Yeah, Demise in his final form, who's sort of the precursor to Ganon. He lays a curse on Link and Zelda at the end of Skyward Sword, which is the beginning of the Zelda timeline, that said, like, for all eternity, like, our reincarnations are going to clash with one another, and sort of sets up like the return of Ganon forevermore. And Skyloft, the island where we start, crashes to the earth. The skeleton that comes alive in the end of at the end of the very first teaser. Obviously, we talked about it, looks like Ganondorf. Looks a whole fucking hell of a lot like Demise. We know that at the end of Breath of the Wild, Zelda says she cannot hear the voice from the Master Sword anymore, which we know through Skyward Sword is Fi, who has said that as long as she's in there, she's going to keep the last remnants of Demise from returning. So it sure fucking looks like they're coming full circle with Skyward Sword of the timeline, and maybe they're going to do some like interesting like flat circle or Mobius wheel shit in terms of like the timeline is resetting, Demise is defeated again and resealed in the Master Sword. We know the Master Sword's like all kinds of fucked up in all the trailers, which strongly suggests that Demise's essence is going to be like restored from there. And then, like, you know, the icing on the cake, they release this fucking gorgeous OLED Switch model. Holy shit. The best looking Switch they've ever released, with the fucking Skyward Sword logo, like retooled in some like Breath of the Wild font, for lack of a better term. And I'm like, damn, this game is hella going to have connective tissue to Skyward Sword. So I'm super glad that I played it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Breath of the Wild also had the connective tissue, just visually with the way you leveled up your stuff. Those statues were all over Skyward Sword.
Yeah,
so
the
a lot of visual
statues,
sort of the goddess statues. I mean, that's like, you know, Fujibayashi being the director of both these games makes sense that it's like they all have connective tissue, and like the Zelda timeline stuff has never been like a hard and fast kind of thing. It's just you sort of take from previous games what you like, and you're like, oh, I'll reference this. For example, in development, Breath of the Wild had Minish, like they had the Bikori, but they just didn't find a good way to implement them in the final game. So it ended up, I think they maybe would have been like related to the Koroks, sort of like the Forest Spirits kind of vibe. So, I mean, there's like nothing off the table as far as being referential. You get like smaller nods with like the names of islands, like having a Koholint island is like, oh, that's cool because, Link's Awakening. But it's like, that's not the real Koholint island. It's just like a reference to it. But I think the Skyward Sword stuff is much more like for those in the know and like the diehards and like the tryhards. Like it's rewarding those who know, and it's not punishing those that don't, because in the end, the story in Zelda games is not like this like grand, deep, riddled with meaning kind of thing. It's like a fable. It's a fun adventure. It's a backsplash to you holding your sword up in the air and vanquishing evil. Like that is the point of the game, is to feel like you're on an adventure, not to tell a story.
Big facts. And they'll fill in folks who don't necessarily know. Like they'll give that information if it is as connected as it seems like it's going to be. And if not, you're right. It'll be those little things where it's like, oh my God, that's blah, 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 and the diehards will be like, mm.
Yeah, I obviously just missed your whole rant, Chris, for fear of spoilers, but it would really be a first for them to suddenly jump in and be like, here's all this important stuff from a game that like we put out 15 years ago or whatever, and I look at Breath of the Wild and like they had the fucking Rito and the Koroks, and like there was all sorts of fan theories based on like the tapestry, and like I can't even remember half the things that people were talking about back then. There's a couple of Easter eggs that were discovered later on, like, and it was much ado about nothing. Breath of the Wild was completely its own thing. It would be weird for them to do like a Breath of the Wild sequel and then also make it a Skyward Sword sequel. Like
every game is a sequel to Skyward Sword, technically, because Skyward Sword is about the origin of Hyrule, like not the timeline. It's just the start of this place that has this sort of like mythical sort of aspect to it.
It is the start of the timeline that they made. Like whether or not we like it, they did shoehorn it into a timeline, and Skyward Sword is the first game in the timeline.
Yeah, it's the earliest game that takes place in Hyrule.
I would just say timeline.
But it's not like a timeline because there's not things that happen before or after. It's just like that's the origin story of this place. And there are many Hyrules. There are many, games. I mean, there are games that Link are in that don't even take place in Hyrule, but they don't have to explain how Link got there. Like he's riding a horse one day and he's in a Labrina, or he's in a Holodrome, like these are just places that he goes, and sometimes he's in Hyrule, and sometimes it's Link, and sometimes he has pink hair, it's very fast and loose.
The Hyrulean multiverse, and all the links are just variants of each other, and it's not that hard to explain in 2023. Everyone's doing it.
Honestly, really.
It would strike me as quite bizarre for them to suddenly, like 6 years later, do a big throwback to another game and make it any more impactful than the Wind Waker references were. Because, like, obviously there was no real connection to Wind Waker in the prior game. Like,
I disagree.
They were just like, yep, we want to use the Rito again because that's fun. They weren't like, let's pay this off in 6 years and we'll explain why they exist 6 years from now when the sequel comes out.
The Road Race is a cool race, and it's also, I don't know why they didn't have Zora in the water game. Come on.
I think that Breath of the Wild Hyrule is the land that Link and Tetra found when they sailed off at the end of Wind Waker. It's fun to speculate, okay? It's fun to speculate. We got more news to talk about. We're like 90 minutes balls deep into this thing.
I did want to talk about for a second that E3 was supposed to come back this year, but now it seems like nuh-uh.
Womp womp.
Personally, I don't have like any affinity towards the entertainment expo, electronic, whatever, electronic entertainment expo. The E3, I don't really care. It's just like, it was nice when it happened because it meant, oh, here's a bunch of announcements happening around the same time. And here are these companies actually like competing with each other on like showmanship, which is cool. And it makes for like fun moments as far as like, oh, what is Xbox showing? What is PlayStation showing? What's Nintendo showing? And like measuring those companies against each other. It was more of like a popcorn sort of event. It was an Oscars event. It was just like a navel gazing sort of media event. But yeah, Xbox ain't going, Nintendo ain't going, Sony ain't going. Ubisoft just said they were going to go and then they're not going to go. Sega said they're not going. So there's just like not a lot of companies that are even left to ask. Like, does anybody really care if EA shows up at this E3? Like, when has their presence ever been, vital to a news event? Has been never. Same with like Activision. Same with like most of the big Western AAA. Like, what is Take-Two really showing at like an E3? Like, sure they had like a Mafia 3 thing, but it's like Mafia is like a third stringer as far as Take-Two is concerned. I mean, NBA 2K is going to do well no matter what. They can trot out some like, basketball players, some like NBA players, and be like, yo, they're talking about and playing our game. Isn't that great? Don't you want to talk about and play our game as well? And it's like, nobody really cares. They don't have any news for a new GTA. So I don't know. It just seems like summer is going to be a weird, hopefully these companies try to keep things dense as far as when things are announced. Because a few years ago when the pandemic was first starting, it was like, E3 is now 3 months long and it's all the crap you don't care about every day for months on end. And it was insufferable. It was really annoying to have everything say, hey, we're important, listen to us, we have something to say. And then it just be like a normal ass news day. But they had to, package it into a direct style video presentation with a faceless voice and some like bad motion graphics. And it was just like another thing from Embracer Group or whatever.
I feel like we could just insert our E3 rant from last year or whatever that was, 2 years ago now at this point. Maybe that was 2020. But it's hard to look at this objectively and say, like, yeah, there's a clear incentive for all these companies to do this at the same time. I think for consumers, you nailed it. It is way better to just get, a week of all of this stuff and news dumps and tweet threads, and then it's over with. It's sort of forces some of these companies' hands to be like, okay, we've got to show something cool to get people hyped up. And I think that, yeah, it hurts the perception of these companies and it desensitizes the people who follow these sort of things, like diluting that impact of, like you said, 3 months of just like bullshit. And we get a video where like the most exciting thing is goodbye volcano fucking high. And you're like, what is this? Do we really just take an hour out of our day for this? So yeah, I think that is like harmful. I mean, it doesn't affect their bottom line at the end of the day, so they won't view it that way. But I think it's harmful for the consumer and the people who are in the know and like to like follow these things. Yeah, having an event that like all eyes are on it. At the end of the day, I think I've said this before, but like E3 itself doesn't fucking matter. It's just a circle jerk for industry dorks. They didn't open it to fans until what, like right before the pandemic?
2018 or 2019, they sort of slowly started introducing more fan like slots as far as who they would actually sell to and how many tickets they would sell.
Right. The event itself is fucking like, I don't give a shit about the event.
No, I just want the cool streams and I want them all to happen, 3 or 4 days in a row.
Right.
And then that to be the chunk. 4 days is about the attention span I have during summer to be like, oh, what's coming up in the next 6 months? What's coming up in the far-flung future, because I like having a couple of those sprinkled in, as a treat. But Chris, what is your history with E3 and your viewing habits of it?
I historically loved it for all the reasons y'all articulated, that it's a big old just explosion of games, news, bombshells every day. Yeah, you'd be like, oh, fuck, I can't believe what they just announced in so-and-so press conference. I have two thoughts. My first thought is that E3 was always going to go as the big three went. Of course, that being Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. And I think that the fact that none of them are particularly interested in doing this anymore, EJ, speaks to what you just said, that it always was about jockeying with each other, because until this console generation, they really were in direct competition with one another. They were all trying to produce like the best exclusive games that would get people to buy their hardware and their software and not the other guys. That's not the case anymore. Everybody is running their own race this console generation. That Nintendo is Nintendo. They have a stable of IP that idiots like us will continue to pay money hand over fist for, to keep playing, because we've been playing it since we're kids. And the core formula works well enough that we're willing to suffer through some shit most of the time. Hashtag Pokemon Scarlet Violet. Sony is like the best looking, best acted AAA games imaginable that you can only get on Sony consoles till they come to PC a year later. And Microsoft is, what can we put on Game Pass that will make more people want to subscribe to that service, whether it's on PC or Xbox. They're all running their own race. They don't need to jockey with one another anymore. So they're not gonna. And they're certainly not going to do it on E3's terms. Second thought, I'm not going to miss this event at all because I'm fucking sick of in development trailers that take years to materialize, that I waste time and energy
Prime 4
wondering
win.
about. Exactly. And Metroid Prime 4 is like the most egregious example in present memory. That's like infamous development history at this point. I'm over it. I don't care. I love what Nintendo does most of the time, and what made that E3 such a notable exception is that they're like, we're going to tell you what's coming out in the next 3 to 6 months. That is it. We are not going to release stuff that's not ready to be seen yet, because they know exactly what happens. It will disappoint people. It'll piss them off. Exactly what happened with Metroid Prime 4 when they announced it way too fucking early because they needed a win, and they did need a win. Because they skipped E3 in 2017?
No, they've never skipped an E3.
No. Sorry. I mean that they only showed Breath of the Wild. They functionally skipped E3.
Correct.
They only showed, that was in 2016?
Yep, because they hadn't shown the Switch yet.
Right.
So they were keeping quiet, and they just had Breath of the Wild, and it was like 30 minutes of that.
Right, exactly. Other
Like
than
Treehouse live footage.
Yeah, other than that, they've always been really good about we're showing stuff that's going to come out soon. That's it. So I'm not going to miss that. I'm not going to miss seeing 3 seconds of Final Fantasy 16 that takes 4 years to come out, or we're remaking Final Fantasy 7 that takes 5 years to come out. I'm sick of that shit. So I'm glad it's gone. I'm glad it's over. Kid me misses it, but Kid me's a fucking idiot. So who cares about what he thinks?
Given our investment in the Fantasy Critic League this year, like if you look at what is actually slated beyond May, it's like 4 games. Like there's just nothing with hard dates. So like we know there is a lot to come this year, and maybe the 3 months of bullshit, Nick, is actually going to be a lot more interesting to us collectively than it otherwise would be. So, I don't know. A single week that we're all rushing to bid on like fucking 12 things would probably be a lot more fun and make better content,
Totally.
but it might be more manageable this way.
I just like when the big three and also associated big third parties feel like they have to put on a show, feel like they have to impress us, because they should be put in that position more often.
They don't owe us anything, Nick.
They don't owe us anything. If they want our money, they owe us a lot. So the thing that nobody seems to be really talking about, because why would they, is another big reason that E3 doesn't really matter anymore, is because written media doesn't really matter anymore. You get chuckleheads on a podcast that can talk about these things for 2.5 hours. You get people on YouTube, you got people on TikTok, you got all sorts of alternative media that is covering these games. And not to mention, the most important thing, I think, is that these big publishers have a direct line to the consumer. They have YouTube channels that people actually subscribe to. They have Twitter accounts that people actually follow and engage with and listen to. And that's how they're getting their news. Like if you're a Nintendo fan, you don't have to follow IGN or GameSpot or whoever. You just follow Nintendo and they'll tell you exactly what's happening. And that is a much more, like, you cut out the middleman. You don't need a review to sell a game because, for these companies, a review website is another part of their marketing plan. Like that is what they think of it as. And to us, consumer, we do find out about good games through reviews, but we also follow these companies directly, so we can just skip out on the middleman altogether. So I think the dwindling relevancy of review outlets, in particular the large ones, means that a event that is catered towards the games journalist is largely irrelevant to a big publisher.
I have nothing to support anything I'm about to say other than just like pure anecdote, but I feel it, Nick, that reviews are still largely important because the average consumer is not like you or I, where we're sort of in a position in our lives where, like, if there's a game that looks interesting to us, we can go buy it. But there's just such a large faction of the industry that like has to be, and rightfully so, like more discerning with their money. Not that we don't have to be, like, you know what I mean?
But as far as like enthusiast press and the thing for E3, you're not getting reviews out of E3 necessarily. You're getting previews. You're getting, here's impressions of a game that will be coming out soon. what is the point of that?
But it's all a part of greasing this wheel that at the end of the cycle, when it's done turning, results in hopefully positive coverage from these people that a large faction of consumers still latch onto. And while print media has evolved and it's become YouTube and TikTok and all these other things, like YouTube is massive still. And the companies who successfully transitioned to that world, and podcasts are fucking huge. Those companies are doing really well. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of like layoffs with traditional journalists and writers, and like there's these segments of the industry that are dying. I don't think this means anything for E3. Like, yeah, again, it's a fucking circle jerk. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But I think those outlets still do in a big way. It's just we're in this weird transition period where a lot of these companies have had to figure out how to be relevant in this new era, and these companies and their PR teams are trying to figure out what works best for them, what the most economical use of their resources, and how that symbiotic relationship will work for the next 10 years. We're figuring it out.
And let's credit Nintendo here in terms of a rare moment in which they were way ahead of the curve with the industry with this, in moving away from these like big pageantry presentations and moving to the Nintendo Direct, moving to the pre-recorded, live streamed video, or in some cases like pre-recorded and just directly uploaded for our consumption. That has since been aped by every other major publisher and certainly console provider.
EJ, I figured maybe you'd want to talk a little bit about the PS5 Pro rumors and what that means from like a hardware and like Sony player, because I don't play on Sony hardware really. I played Bloodborne and that was like the extent of my PS4 tryst.
Two things. One, this is an extremely rare thing. It's only happened once in modern gaming history when the Duke got revised for the original Xbox, but a PS5 Pro is an opportunity for Sony to correct some of the issues with the DualSense. I don't think they will, considering how beloved that controller is, despite being a deeply flawed controller with horrible ergonomics. But second, and I've said this a million goddamn times, and I'll say it a million goddamn more, how is it that in 2023, with consoles as powerful as they are, we are still stuck choosing between performance mode that runs at 45 frames per second or looks kind of better mode that runs at 30 frames per second? People say that there is no room for a PS5 Pro or an Xbox Infinity, or whatever the fuck the next iterations are going to be, because like, oh, it made sense before because we were going from 1080p to 4K, blah, blah, blah. Shut the fuck up. Why are we not targeting at least native 4K at 60 frames per second? It is possible. Just dial some of the bells and whistles back and just make games that run well, and quit making me choose, okay? Quit making me have to go do my own goddamn research and watch an hour-long Digital Foundry video to find out what the most optimal way for me to play the game is. So yes, a PS5 Pro would be great. Except
you'd have to monetarily reward the company for making the bad games in the first place.
But then I can buy your base PS5 for a song, and then everybody everybody happy.
Yeah, so
$500 PS5 lightly used.
Yeah, no five. But in all seriousness, if this results in a price drop, I'm here for it, because that's
no chance. Bro, they raised the price in the world.
With a pro model, you're not telling me the base model drops to $400.
There's no way. If they put out a pro version, they're selling that for like $700.
Oh, well then fuck them.
And that's it.
I like how this is funny, Nick, you put in here. Mainly a soft way to increase the price of the system.
The OLED was that for the Switch.
But that is demonstrably better, and EJ and I can both tell you that.
Sure, but it's not $50 worth of kit. I mean, that's not a P&L increase. That's just, hey, we don't want to drop. They also never dropped the price of the OG system. I mean, it's literally the same exact thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Saying that Sony would probably do. Nintendo did that 2 years ago.
We're talking about $300 to $350. I don't think that's comparable. You're talking about going from a $500 console to a $700 console. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's.
I'm just saying it's possible.
The difference being is Sony would actually make a console that like justifies the price increase, whereas Nintendo,
they probably like double the RAM, increase the storage capacity and overclock the CPU, and that's it.
No, the PS4 Pro was like a meaningful upgrade.
Well, the PS4 was like dog shit when it came out, and the PS5 is not comparable in like the landscape as far as like where GPUs and CPUs were at that point. The PS4 and the Xbox One were like ancient laptop tech at that point. That was like the period in time where everyone was like doom and gloom about whether or not there even would be video game consoles in the future because of how big mobile and even like PC gaming were getting at that point. So we're not in that point anymore. So if they did put out a Pro, I don't think it would be meaningfully more powerful. I think it would be meaningfully more expensive. And that people were just like, oh, well, it says Pro. I mean, I don't know what the difference between an iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Max is, but the Max one is more expensive. So that must mean it's better. It's got a bigger screen. It's got to be more powerful, right? And it's like, maybe a little bit, but it's not going to be like demonstrably more powerful. This is going to be for the people who don't know and the people who have too much money and want to spend it.
I'm just saying, keep some love on the OLED. It is a demonstrable and dramatic increase to how that console looks.
And they could have sold it for $300 and still made money off of it, but they wanted to make more money off of it.
Well, that's just capitalism, baby. I'm taking that as a given. Yeah. I'm taking that as
capitalism is anti-consumer, my brother.
That's right. Nintendo gets no praise for this. The OLED is an upgrade. Great. 5 years into the console cycle, and it costs more than it did at launch.
$50 more. That's it.
It was overpriced. $300 is too much. You want to talk about outdated tech?
It's the most affordable home console on the market, but yeah, it's fucking overpriced. Like, come on.
And with inflation, that $350 is basically like $300 now. So
I'm just saying, it has been a useful increase. It has been a meaningful iteration for my friends who play in handheld mode. Many of us don't. Respect to you. I would not get an OLED if you're playing that game docked all the time. That's totally fine. Save that $50 that apparently is a big fucking deal.
Well, it's $350. I mean, it's not just the $50. Like, if I could just trade in my Switch.
This also coming from the person who 2.5 years in still isn't on a PS5. So like, let's not be throwing stones at people who are talking about a $50 difference.
Because a $350 console is a big fucking difference than a $500 console or a $700 console. It's literally twice as expensive. Like, that is an affordable console for the common working man.
Discless version's only $50 more than the OLED Switch, Chris. Only $50 more.
Discless is for losers,
it's only
and you know it. Would you buy a discless PS5, EJ? No, you fucking wouldn't. Don't come at me with that weak take.
I'm also not quibbling over the price of these consoles.
Part of this reporting, I mean, obviously I linked the article so you can read the full thing, but I only put this in because this was my take on it. But part of this reporting also is that it would be a discless version of the console as well.
Bad. That's bad.
But they would sell a peripheral that would be the disc reader. Which guess how much that would probably cost.
No, fuck all this. Fuck all this so hard. No, fuck this. Fuck this.
I'm with Chris.
I swear to fucking God. What did you just say?
I'm with Chris.
Holy shit. Whoa, it finally
we broke a new ground here, folks.
Holy shit. Oh my God. No, I swear to Christ of the Nazarene, if they release a
You lost EJ with the Nazarene. Already taking a sip of water too. That's rude.
Oh God, that's funny. Anyway, I can't even still be bad. That was so fucking funny. I am out. I'm out so hard. If they're like, it's discless, but you can buy the disc player version. You can buy the disc player add-on. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
What year is this? God damn, that's absurd.
Like a fucking CD-ROM drive that plugs into the USB port for your tower that doesn't have a CD-ROM drive.
Yes, exactly like the HD DVD player for the Xbox 360 that you could watch Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the movie, the game. In glorious 1080p.
Oh, you're hurting me
on the dead format. Oh, yes.
The HD DVD. Oh, dude, I was like totally thinking that was little red cases.
HD DVD.
Dude, I really thought that was going to win because when Sony hitched
Blu-ray, they can't even spell Blu-ray.
Oh yeah, that was why. When Sony hitched their wagons to Blu-ray and the PS3 looked like it was dead on arrival, I was like, their toast. HD DVD is going to win. That take aged so badly.
The Spider-Man PS3.
Oh, I want that controller so bad. I would pay any amount of money for the Boomerang PS3 prototype controller. Console Crusade listeners, if you hear me and you have disposable income, you don't. It's fine. Buy me this prototype. I need it so badly.
I think I'm mostly recovered from that. My chest hurts. That was horrifying. If Microsoft had implemented the HD DVD player into their fucking consoles instead of selling it as a fucking $68 add-on, but at the end of the day, Sony learned from their mistakes. I'm out of breath. God damn, you guys are assholes. PS3 had a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, it ended up selling as many units as fucking Xbox 360. Yeah, it's just one of the many stumbles that the Microsoft Corporation found themselves making.
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft was as instrumental in HD DVD as Sony was in Blu-ray.
Sure.
So I think that's probably more of like a deal that whoever was a part of the HD DVD consortium made with Microsoft to have and it was probably just like, yo, we heard that Sony's got this Blu-ray thing that they're going to put in their next console, so we need to have something that combats that as well. Anyway, that is a total aside. Did you guys want to talk about another sort of... Well, no, we don't have to talk about Redfall. We don't really care.
I did counterpick it in the Console Crusade League. So, you know.
That's it was an interesting choice. We'll see how that nets out. I wonder if it'll be a similar to my Deathloop counterpick that
would be
biting
insane.
me in the buns.
Okay, Redfall looked like shit. What they showed was bad. And then they're like, always online. Play with your friends. No, it's an online experience and a single-player game. Oh, yeah, really, Suicide Squad? That doesn't work. Now they're walking things back. So anyway, fuck them.
It seems like Arcane as like a studio and the way they approach PR and sort of their messaging to users, it seems like they are one of those studios that are like really invested in making sure their players are happy. You see this a lot in like a lot of niche but larger Western double to AAA studios. I think of like the people who make XCOM, you know, like these very niche and specific game makers that know their audience because they are so hardcore. And I think that they heard loud and clear that the always online thing is like, nobody wants that. And instead of them doubling down and getting like pissy about it, they said, yeah, we'll listen to you. We'll try to, like, we can't make promises because it is really late in development. This game is coming out in a couple months. Like, we can't say we're getting rid of it, but we're trying. We are doing what we can. And I think that goes a long way in engendering trust in a consumer base for a frankly niche developer with Arcane, and like making these immersive sim games with like Prey and God, what is the Death of the Outsider? Anyway, just like these games that have like a hardcore fan base but are not like megaton successes. They sell like a couple million copies at the ceiling. You know, this is like Metroid level stuff. And these are developers that care about what their fans are saying about their game, because it goes a long way. Like these are games that are sold on the goodwill of people saying, hey, you need to play this game. It is a word of mouth kind of game. Redfall, I think, is in a different sort of echelon because it is launching into Game Pass and Xbox has nothing else coming out this summer. So that in and of itself will sort of boost the marketing behind it. A lot more people are going to play this game than Deathloop had players, because by the time that hit Game Pass, it was old news. You know, everyone had already either played it or watched a review on it, and they probably didn't jump in and play it. But this being, like you said, EJ, sort of a Far Cry, Left 4 Dead multiplayer, you know, golf game, you know, the type of game that we would play because we just want to have something to do while we're hanging out and chatting, literally shooting the shit while we're shooting the shit. So I think if this game is well executed, it could be a really, you know, fantastic game. I don't think we've seen enough of that. And also, I don't think that we, as players of these games very infrequently, I don't think we have the sort of know-how to see what others would see in it, like reviewers especially. So as far as like the league is concerned, I don't think that either of us are smart enough in this genre to say with authority whether or not it will score well. I'm just going purely on game pedigree and preview sort of coverage where people think, yeah, this has potential. I'm not exactly stoked on these elements, whatever, but we haven't seen enough of it. Like we've only previewed this game in single player when it's a multiplayer game. So I think that could also come into effect as far as the league is concerned. But whether or not it's a good game is also a completely separate thing from our league.
How it reviews, those are very different things.
You know, I thought going into the league this year, I had a pretty good grasp on things, and the last couple of weeks have shown me that reviewers are unhinged individuals who have no consistency or integrity whatsoever.
Oh, no.
That could be us.
That could be us. Console Crusade podcast website coming soon.
I don't know anymore how to evaluate things. Even the games, it's like I joked in the group chat, like Bayonetta. Literally, the blurb on the thing is like, this game is not fun or well designed, and it looks like shit. Also, it's nothing like the thing that you love about this franchise. I loved it. I'm like, I don't fucking get it. I don't understand. Meanwhile, something like Storyteller
is all that has fallen off a cliff. It opened at like 75 and it's like a 71 now, 70. Like, dude, golly, what an hell.
It's awful. And all the blurbs are like, what a charming little puzzle platformer, perfect bite-sized experience, 6 out of 10. What the fuck? Meanwhile, Terra Nil, same thing. It comes, it goes, it does its job, it's gone. 9 out of 10. I don't understand the consistency with which these people are reviewing games.
It's whose line is it anyway out there, man? It's just, the numbers are made up and the reviews don't matter.
We got to wrap this up, but let's end real quick on chatting Lance Reddick. And I bring this up, obviously, he passed away a couple weeks ago. He just done John Wick, that whole franchise the last couple of years, and he was in The Wire, but he, to us gamers, was Zavala in Destiny, which Chris and I have put a lot of time into that franchise. And then he was the villain,
gray villain,
sort of, in Horizon.
Silence.
Yeah, he's in your ear the whole first game. And then he kind of becomes the bad guy in the second game, and I never finished that, so I don't know how that plays out. But an iconic voice. And when news of his passing broke and everybody was online sort of you Googleizing, shout out to the Zoolander reference. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the chuckle. I appreciate it.
What, you don't think I'm a good Googleizer?
Yeah. Thank you. I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like bummer, right? But then all these clips started coming out of him in interviews, and all of these stories and firsthand accounts started coming out. And this is always interesting to me because I sort of have this default philosophy of like, celebrities are all like fucked up people who are completely disconnected from like the real world. The more I experience in the world of celebrities, the more I kind of believe it. But there's a massive difference between someone like Jonathan Majors. One thing happens, the entire industry, as soon as this happened, all of these stories come out about what an abusive, narcissistic fuck that guy is. And I don't want to take away from where I'm actually going with this, but like Lance Reddick passes, and dude, the timeline and the subreddits were filled with all of these crazy little stories of like, oh, I met him at a con, he did this, or coworkers saying like all these things about him. And then you see all these little interviews. Dude, what a character. And I didn't know this guy, and I didn't, other than obviously being pretty familiar with his work, both in film and television and obviously video games, he was just the voice. Like, I didn't think much of it and until all these little things start trickling out. And so anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that other than shouting out Lance Reddick, who was great at his job and was apparently one hell of a person. So
I always love the little gamer things that happen around stuff like this, where it's like, how can we pay tribute, right? And there's like an ongoing vigil happening around his character in Destiny 2, where folks are literally just like posting up and leaving their character there to pay their respects. And it's stuff like that that gives me hope that like the game industry and a lot of these folks who are often very fucking toxic to each other online and denigrate each other online and say horrible things to each other online are like capable of being better.
And something in particular about Destiny is like Lance Reddick was an outspoken fan of Destiny. Like, he played the game, and that is so rare. Like, it's not Chris Pratt reading from a cue card being like, it was my dream to play Mario.
On Koopas.
Yeah.
Koopas.
Yeah. It's just
Go
like,
fuck yourself, Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt, if you're listening, you're the fucking worst Chris in Hollywood. It's over. You won.
All right. Chris and I can't say anything nice about anybody without having to denigrate somebody else in the process, tangentially related or otherwise.
The only thing that any of us can be hopeful of when we kick this mortal shell is that other people have good things to say about us. And there was a lot of that over the past like week after his passing, and like just little snippets of interviews, and like that's all that we have the attention span for anyway. Like hearing a cute story about Lance Reddick and getting visited by Keanu Reeves on his birthday because Keanu Reeves just wanted to hang out with Lance on Keanu Reeves' birthday. Like, those stories are really cool. Him on, Eric Andre's show is just crazy and hilarious and amazing. And like, he sells it so hard. And this man with like, he is such a good, I love comedic actors that are just playing it straight and dramatic. Like, I think that is so difficult to do, and he did it so expertly. And yeah, I played only a little bit of Destiny, but I could see like it's so obvious. Like that's one of those characters that you're turning in weeklies to, you're doing a little quest for, and you get those little vocal cues, and that is part of the endorphin rush. And when you hear that this person who has also had and harbored a positive relationship with the community passes away of natural causes, like very unexpectedly at a young age of 60, then obviously you want to show your respect for him. And that is like, it's weird and it is bizarre and morbid and strange, but it is also very heartwarming at the same time. Like you're just moving your character model in front of this other character model who is voiced by a guy who just died. Like it is unimitable in any other sort of medium, but that's the way that, you know, we as gamers wanted to show that, like, yeah, this sucks, and, you know, thoughts and prayers with his family. And I don't know if there's any charities. I don't think that they're really, you know, saying anything about like what caused his death. They just said natural causes. But yeah, it just sucks. He was a great voice. He was awesome in everything he was in. He elevated everything he was in. And that's all we can really say about it, as just like schmucks who didn't really give two thoughts to Lance Reddick until he passed away. But that's big news for gamers, I think.
I try not to think about celebrities, you know, in general, but it's you start thinking back and you realize like what an ever-present character this guy was. And I mean, you think about Destiny. I put hundreds of hours into Destiny, and he's like in your ear the majority of that experience. Like it rotates between like 4 actors who are talking at you constantly. So anyway, shout the fuck out to Lance Reddick. Yeah, not to end on a total bummer, but you know.
I don't know. We could talk about Nintendo some more and get mad again if you really want.
Yeah, Chris is ready for bed. We've lost the boy.
No, I'm contemplative, and Nick hit me with the, you know, Nintendo-ified Shakespeare quote with "kicked this mortal shell." So I'm just feeling very contemplative. But I do think it's a good note to end on. Like, you know, pour one out for Lance Reddick. Seemed like a real one. He'll be missed.
That's the Console Crusade podcast. We talk news, finally, for the first time in so long.
We do that?
Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, I think this is my first newscast since I guested like my second episode when we were talking about Mario 3D collection. We talked about news for a second, and I was like, I have like nothing to say. I'm a guest, and I played the Mario games, and we'll come back in.
Now we're here.
I mean, yeah, now we're here. We'll talk about news more frequently. It will be less of a dump because this was a couple weeks, you know, sort of build up. But next time, hopefully, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about video games we've been playing. I know maybe we can twist EJ's arm some more and get him to finally, EJ, I'll say this for me personally. I do not think that you have to finish Metroid Prime Remastered. I just want you to get to a point where you think you can speak like from a point of understanding, like you've experienced enough of the game that you can talk about it, because there is a level of growth and character progression that you go through in any Metroid game, any game that is similar to Metroid or Zelda, that if you don't experience enough of it, then you can't really speak to it in like a sense of understanding. So once you get to that point, I don't know if Chris and I can talk about how far you should get before that is like enough. Like if it is that torturous to you, I don't want to put you through that. I mean, that's not the way I want my friends to experience the things I love. I want you to come at it from a point of appreciation at the very least. And I don't want to poison that any more than you can handle.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm saving all of this for the Metroid podcast that we will do with Bren, because he's also playing it. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on things. I also feel valid. We're not even talking about it at all.
Because I think personally, Chris, tell me if I'm wrong.
No
I think
spoilers.
getting to Phendrana, I think would be a good point in which you kind of get it, right? There's enough boss encounters, there's enough upgrades by that point, and you've seen enough of the locations to have like a grasp on the sort of trajectory that you're going to be going on.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get through Thardis. Because I think that getting the thermal visor and that section is worthwhile. Because other than Flahagra, like that's the only real boss you will have fought
like big
by
boss,
that point. Yeah, exactly. And I think there's
there's
a cool boss
other
fight.
quote unquote bosses, but
Yeah, they're mini bosses, you know what I mean? But yeah, I would agree. And I'd say, yeah, getting through Thardus is probably the place to be. EJ, I don't know where you're at. Again, like, I don't want to talk about Metroid Prime. I just want to know literally where the fuck you are in this game.
For all you know, I've beaten the game.
Oh,
You don't know.
No, you haven't.
No, you would have gloated and said, this doesn't work. It's fucking outdated. Just submit it. You would have
No.
gone on a whole fucking rant. Where are you? Just fucking tell me.
I wouldn't be surprised if he'd like just hit Chozo Ruins. I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
Just come on, give me some credit.
No.
Okay, you have
Give
the
me
morph
some
ball.
credit.
You have the morph
I
ball,
am-
maybe.
I definitely have the morph ball. I am at a point though that I feel like I would probably rather just use a guide. I'm pretty annoyed.
I say just use a guide. I say play through the
No,
guide. I don't
God,
think
do it.
I don't think you're losing anything by not
Don't be a hero, bro.
follow a guide and just do the I don't know what, like, can you change the difficulty mid game, or like I would just say like drop it to easy and
It's
just
not
like
hard. It's
Okay,
not
EJ,
hard.
EJ, I'm not talking about difficulty. I'm talking about obstructions getting in your way of just being a content tourist, which I think would also give you another perspective of playing this game, of seeing everything that it has to offer, as opposed to thoroughly engaging with it, which can be obtuse and troublesome to someone like you. So that was what my point was.
And make sure the hint system's on, because it'll literally tell you where to go.
It's a really good hint system. It's
What do you
a
mean-
historically good hint system.
You people.
I mean,
Console Crusade
idiot.
Podcast! Console Crusade Podcast! I am Buff Muffin!
No, we're bringing it back.
I am the fuzz. We got Jiggle.
the fuzz, and the buff muffin, dude.
Or should I be Muff Buffin?
Dude, I'm buffing muffs, dude. Okay, count us down.